So to explain the basic concept of blockchain, we first need an imaginary scenario. So let's imagine 4 strangers sitting at a table who don't trust each other at all. The goal is for the 4 people to trade without cash, in our example with imaginary money. This requires accounting, so that everything is always correct. But before we can start working with imaginary money, we need rules. These rules ensure that security is created. So the first rule is, that there must always be a ledger in the middle of the table. All transactions are stored here. It must be written down who sends money, how much money they send, and to whom they send it. The second rule is, that everyone has to write down all transactions. For this purpose everyone gets a pen and paper. The third rule is, that everyone has to check that everyone else has also written down everything correctly. This is important so that the accounting is always correct for everyone. The fourth rule is, that everyone agrees that everything has been written down correctly. If that is the case, a verified copy is placed in the ledger in the middle of the table. Now we can start trading. But soon, the first problem appears. Amy and Anne have no more desire to write everything down. It is too much work, they only want to trade with each other. Bob is upset about this, because he always writes everything down properly. But without proper accounting, our scenario doesn't work. In order to solve the problem, the first one to write everything down correctly gets a reward. Bob is happy about that, because he now has an incentive to write everything down correctly. And Amy and Anne can trade without having to write down everything. But now there is another problem. The situation arises, that 2 people want to put a correct transaction list in the middle of the table at the same time. However, only one validated copy can be in the ledger at the same time. How do we solve the problem now? Simply by introducing a second difficulty criteria. So when someone has written down a transaction list correctly, we encrypt the paper with a lock. The first one to open it gets a reward. So if Bob manages to open the lock first, then he can put his transaction list into the ledger. Then he gets his reward. This makes it almost impossible for 2 people to put a completed transaction list in the middle at the same time. We have now created a situation, in which everyone at the table can trade with imaginary money without trusting each other. They only have to trust the ledger. The same principles happen in our blockchain. The only difference is, that we do not have humans. So instead of people sitting on a table, we have nodal points. So these nodal points are people with computers in a peer-to-peer network. These people can be passive users, who only want to transfer money. But if you want, you can also actively use the system to earn money. For example, these active users are called miners, and they are responsible for transactions. They also ensure that our blockchain network is always secured. To do that, they use a consensus mechanism called proof of work. As a result of proof of work, everybody agrees that the accounting in our blockchain is always correct. This results in a transparent and secure peer-to-peer network, whose integration is maintained by correct accounting. As a result, we have a system of trust, that makes it possible to trade money in the digital world without a third party.